Alright, so we have our materials in place, things are looking good, but our level looks a little bit drab. It's kind of empty, you can almost hear your own voice echo in here. It's time for us to start placing static meshes. Now, static meshes serve a lot of roles inside of Unreal Engine 3. They can just be purely decorative to make things look cooler, add more detail, or they can be things that your players can actually interact with. You can make an entire level out of just about nothing but static meshes, if you so desire. Now, to help illustrate how important static meshes are in your levels, what I'm going to do is open up one of the levels that is already included with UDK. I'm going to go to File, Open, and let me jump up a level. I'm going to grab VCTF Sandstorm.udk and click Open. We'll give that just a moment to load up. And as soon as it comes in, here we are inside of Sandstorm. Now, I'm going to hit the G key to put this in game mode because that makes it look very glorious and wonderful and beautiful. Now, as we take kind of a sweeping view of all this, there's just a ton of rich detail. There's spires that go up toward the sky. There's these cool walls with all this great concrete work and pillars and everything. What I'm going to do is hit the W key, and W will hide out static meshes. Check this out. This is your level without static meshes. Very, very boring. This is just the terrain and some BSP surfaces. So we could fly up here above it and start to kind of fly across it. Pretty drab, pretty barren. Now, let's hit W again and bring those back. And there you go. So you can see all of the detail that static meshes are adding to this level. Almost the entire level, almost everything you see, or really anything that you'd want to see, anything worth looking at, is probably a static mesh. So keep that in mind as you're setting up your own levels, that when you're to the BSP stage, when you're just looking at your materials and whatnot, it's still a little early to get a solid idea of what your level's going to look like. Now, that said, let's go ahead and jump back to our level. So I'm going to click on the Recent Files button, and let me jump back to my simple level. And here we are in our suddenly very, very drab-looking, by comparison, level. It's kind of sad. Now, nobody can tell you how to actually place static meshes in your level. Everybody's got a little bit of a different method. In fact, if you're just trying to get an idea of what you want your level to look like, you might find yourself just placing some BSP brushes just to kind of rough in where you want static meshes. Like if you want pillars or supports on the ceiling or any sort of decoration along the wall, it might be faster just to kind of temporarily rough in your level to just create some quick BSP brushes and then find some static meshes with which you can replace those brushes. Now I'm not going to do that here, not for this example. When I'm doing this sort of thing, I like to think of a level like this as kind of a building that I just bought from a realtor. They just handed me the keys, I now own the place, I've got the papers, I now have a mortgage or something I've got to pay every month, so now I've got to do something with it. Now, the way I like to treat an environment such as this is I will begin by creating the absolute necessary structures first. Things like supports to help hold up the walls or the ceiling, or things that the level absolutely has to have. Don't worry about functionality. Now, in the end, know what you're going to be building. In this case, we're going to be putting together a garage-style environment, but it's just a building, first and foremost. I mean, it may not necessarily have to be a garage. It could be, just a warehouse, or, maybe it's just like a big steel area that they use to, to store random pieces of machinery. It could be anything. And no matter what purpose it was suited for, it would have to have a certain set of things. It would need something to help hold up the ceiling, because it is kind of a flat ceiling. And I would like to think that would have something underneath to help hold it up. You could always argue that maybe the supports are beyond, the ceiling that we see, but it'll just make things more interesting. So that's where I'm going to begin. Let's jump into the content browser. Now I'm going to grab some very particular static meshes. I'm going to give you exactly what to search for if you want to create the exact same level that I am. However, as I mentioned with the materials level, I highly encourage you to strike out on your own. If you want to build an entirely different environment with what you have at hand in terms of static meshes or even materials, please do that and try something completely different. But if you want to follow along, here's what I'm going to be using. We're going to start off by searching for buildings, space, bunker, and add the word SUP, so bunker sup, to the word bunker. So now we can see 3 separate supports. You can really pick any one of these. I'm just going to grab bunker sup A3, which is our third one. Now I'm going to restore down my content browser, make it a little bit smaller, and then just drag this right here into my view. Now actually, before I drag that, take a look at your drag grid settings. I'm going to set this temporarily back up to 32, which is where it was when we ended our last video. I actually changed it for just a moment because I was testing something, so make sure your drag grid's at 32. Now we're going to drag this out of the content browser and here onto the floor, and I'll just close out the content browser for now. So we have our first static mesh. So our level is only slightly less boring than it was a minute ago. Let me demaximize the perspective viewport, and we'll maximize the top view. What I'm going to be building here is a series of supports. I guess I should have mentioned this before, but we'll just kind of go from here. I'm going to build a set of supports that will go up the wall, across the ceiling, and then back down the other side of the wall. And then if we want to repeat that down the length of the room, we can do that. So here in the top view, I'm going to, well, I don't want to rotate that guy. Let me rotate him back where he was. I'm going to tap the spacebar until I see the transformation widget, and then move this guy right over here into the corner. Now, currently, with a drag grid setting of 32, I'm not quite getting this guy as close to the corner as I would like. So I'm going to set this down from 32 to 8, and we can snap that over a grid space and snap it back one. And now it fits pretty snugly into the corner. If you look, there's a tiny little gap there, but that's a little bit too low of a gap for me to really be concerned about. So we have one little concrete pillar as the base of our support. Well, that's fantastic. Now let's grab some more stuff. Let's go back into the content browser. And the next thing I want you to search for is bunker base, one word. So bunker base. And you're going to see SLT buildings SM bunker base C support 1. I'm going to slide the content browser kind of out of the way and just drag and drop this right against the wall. Now, this static mesh has a different scale factor than our little concrete pillar. It's a lot smaller, but I can use my translation widget. If I get out of game mode here, we could drag it right down on top of the other one, and we could rotate it. So let me tap the spacebar to get my rotation widget, and I'm just going to orient this guy so he's facing kind of forward, and I'll clean up that rotation here in the top view. Obviously, it's a little bit small, so I just switched to the translation widget to kind of clean up its position, but we need to change its size. Now, we're going to do that using the draw scale fields down here at the very bottom of the Unreal Editor user interface. We see 4 separate fields. Now, this first field allows you to scale the object uniformly in all 3 axes, and the next 3 fields allow you to scale in each individual axis, being X, then Y, then Z. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my X field, which is the second field over, and set that to 1.5, and that's just going to thicken up the width of this support. Now we're going to take our other 2 axes and set those to 2 and 2, and I'm using the down arrow key to jump in between those fields. Now with that done, here in the top view, I'm just going to line these 2 objects up as close as I can. You'll notice it's not perfect. You know, one of these meshes is kind of going into the wall. That's not a big deal. That's no problem at all. All right, so our support starts off here on the floor. It's already climbed its way most of the way to the ceiling. Now we just need something to kind of bridge the gap and span over across the ceiling. Let's grab a new static mesh. Now again, I'm just giving you search variables that you can punch in to get exactly what I'm using. If you just want to dig through the static meshes and do your own thing, hey, that's cool. So what I'm going to search for now is chasm. And I can already see the one I'm looking for, but I'm going to add to this bolster, so chasm, bol, and all I get is BOL. And there it is. There's the mesh I'm looking for. So let's just drag and drop that right against the ceiling, and it's going to be placed in a really weird kind of way. So temporarily, I'm just going to close the content browser. I'm not going to maximize the view, but we're going to use several different viewports here. Here in the top view, I'm going to tap spacebar and rotate this guy so that the thinner edge is pointed upward in the top view. And now we can kind of slide this down here in the side view so we can see it just a little bit better. So let's kind of bring it into the room. This is a huge mesh for our purposes, so we're going to scale it down a little bit. I'm going to come in here to the XYZ draw scale. It actually scales in all 3 axes at once. That's our first field. I'm going to set that to 0.5 to make this guy, well, actually I think it's technically a quarter of its size, but I won't go into all that. That's too many multi-dimensional math. Always throws me off. Now we're going to take our X factor for draw scale, and we're going to set that to 1.5. And that just gives us a little bit of extra width. So now we can take this guy and position him. Now I'm going to do this right here in the side view. So I'm just going to slide it up here and place it kind of against the ceiling. I'm also just going to slide it back through the wall. It's okay that it penetrates the wall a little bit. And then here inside perspective, I can just slide it to the left so it lines up. And it kind of makes it look like we have these two pieces that sort of lock together. All right, so now our brace climbs up the wall and starts to reach across, and you can see what we're doing is we're just grabbing different static meshes and kind of connecting them together. And that's a really cool way to think about static meshes. No matter what you think a static mesh could be used for, try not to lock your brain into thinking of it that way. Try to think of ways that you could scale it or rotate it or in some other way change its shape or position or orientation so that it could be used for a variety of different things. Like even this little corner piece that we're using right here, that could be part of a piece of machinery that has a claw that holds objects up. I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. All right, now, our next piece, we're going to grab chasm blocks. Let's go back into the content browser. And where we started to type bolster, I'm going to pull that back. And actually, just by bringing it to chasm B, we can see SLT supports chasm block 1. Let's grab this guy. And I'm going to drag the content browser out of the way. Let's just drag and drop this right into the ceiling. Now this is an enormous static mesh, so we're going to bring this guy down quite a bit. First off, here in the top viewport, I'm just going to rotate it around. Now I'm going to rotate it kind of forward, but I think we're going to end up having to turn it around eventually. Now in the perspective view, I'll slide it in here so we can see it. Now obviously that's a little bit big. So I'm just going to take our all-around scale, our first draw scale field, and set that to 0.5, and that gets a whole lot smaller. Now, in perspective, I'm going to tap spacebar, and in the y-axis, I'm going to rotate this guy around 180 degrees. And if I get the content browser out of the way, I can check that here in the side view to make sure it's nice and level with the ceiling. Now let's get the translation widget, and I'll just slide this guy right up here against the ceiling. And we can kind of slide him over in the top view so that he fits right in with our brace. So it's like two surfaces that kind of lock together. But you know what? I actually think I want them to lock in the opposite direction. So I'm going to take this guy and in the top view, rotate him around 180 degrees again, and then we'll just slide him back. And really, it's entirely up to you. If you want it to click together in a different way, then you have that power. That's why you're the level designer. I'm just the guy trying to show you how to use the editor. All right, so now we've got that far. We still need to reach the rest of the way across our level. So what I'm going to do is reuse one of our existing meshes. I'm going to grab this guy right here that's kind of halfway up the wall. I'm going to hold down Alt and drag him forward in the x-axis. Tap the space bar, and here along the green y-axis, I'm going to rotate that guy forward 90 degrees. And a little bit further, make sure he's nice and flat. And then we're just going to slide him up to the ceiling. So let's actually use our side view here. And I'll just kick that over. Now, I wouldn't mind this guy being just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to come over here to my settings, and let's just start off by setting all these to 1. Because if I'm going to change my scale, I like to have a base scale to work from. So we'll start off with 1. Now I'm going to take my first field, which will scale uniformly, and we're going to set that up to 2. And that looks pretty good. I mean, that's going to start to click together fairly well. A little bit of excess on either side, but I'm okay with that. But I wouldn't mind this being just a tiny bit longer. So I'm going to take my Z field, and we're going to set that to 1.25. So that ends up making the object longer. It's scaling on its local axes. Now if we take a look here in the side view, which is looking right down kind of the front of our level, we can slide this over. And if we take a look, you see this kind of darker gray grid line? This is kind of the center of our level. What I'm going to do is position this guy so that he just barely crosses over the center line of the level. And now we have a support system which reaches from the floor all the way across the ceiling. Now, of course, we could just keep right on building, and we could duplicate these guys over one by one and position them. But wow, that would be, well, that'd take forever. I don't want to do that. Let's hold down Control. And I'm going to select all the static meshes we've placed so far. I'm going to demaximize this viewport and jump over to the top viewport. We'll make that nice and big. Now check this out. I'm going to hold down Alt and slide this off to the side. That makes a duplicate of these meshes, all of them at once. Now tap spacebar to get your rotation widget and rotate this guy around 180 degrees. Real easy. Tap spacebar again, and now all we have to do is position this guy directly across from his counterpart. And there we go. So they're hanging over equal amounts on both sides, which is great. Let's go ahead and demaximize this view. Take a look over here in perspective. And we have a brace system which reaches all the way across the room. That's fantastic. That's exactly what I want. So now, I'm going to grab all of these meshes together. And let's grab this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy. And let's just duplicate them all the way to the far end. So holding down Alt, here in the top view, I'm going to slide these guys to the left and get them really close to the wall. Maybe not right on top of the wall, but pretty close. Now let's just measure the distance in between these guys. In fact, I may need to move that guy just a little bit closer. I've got this nice major grid line here. I wonder if I can just kind of cram that in so it fits just inside that major grid. Because that would be nice. I like even spacing. And let's see, if we measure that across, that is, closing in on 864. You know what? I'm just going to eyeball it. Don't tell anybody I did this. I'm going to hold down Alt and drag this guy to somewhere right about the middle. That's pretty close. And there we go. So now we have 3 supports running down. Now, if we really wanted to be hardcore about making sure that was right in the middle, what I would probably do is pull down my drag grid settings a little bit and then just start by doing some measurements. So here we are 400 units on one side with a little bit of change left over, and then over here we are not quite 400 units. So it looks like actually if we took this thing and moved it 1 grid space to the left, we'd be about as close as we're going to have to worry about getting right now. Although it still looks a little bit left heavy. I'm not going to stress it. I could sit here all day and try to measure that out, but I'm not going to. So we have our braces sitting up here. Now what I want to do is go ahead and save the video at this point. Let's go ahead and just kind of stop right here, and then we'll pick up and add some more meshes in the next video.